Welcome into the Gig'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Carter Karels, and we're lucky to have a special guest with us today. Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated is here to join us to talk about the upcoming matchup between Texas A&M and Notre Dame. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Hey, good to be with you guys. Good to see Carter again.
Yep, a little familiar faces. Yeah, I know you guys were talking about a little family reunion a little bit. We'll be down in College Station this weekend. Big game, obviously, big game for both sides. A top 20 matchup to open the season. Wanted to start out with this. Just how big of a game do you feel like this is for Marcus Freeman and this Notre Dame program with where they're at?
Yeah, it's his biggest. Personally, for Marcus Freeman, number one was his first game going back to Ohio State 3 years ago. But he had all the grace in the world from Notre Dame fans going into that game. And Ohio State was a double-digit underdog. Notre Dame played well and lost. This is the biggest one for him because it's at the point from a Notre Dame fan's perspective. It's at the point now where people still really, really, really like Marcus Freeman, but nobody likes 9-4 very often. And I don't think losing to A&M is going to be viewed anywhere near the same as it was losing to Ohio State in that game in Columbus a couple of years ago. Now that he's in year three is supposed to be the magical year for all Notre Dame coaches. Everyone that's won a championship wins it in year three. And to be frank, their team this year will be better than next year's team just because of what they brought back on defense. So it's pretty important really going in.
Tim, I got a two-part question for you. The first part is, what was it like being Mike Elko's neighbor? Because I know you'd mentioned that before. It's pretty funny. But part two, the serious one, is we look at this game and both offenses kind of have some questions. Both defenses have, definitely have the look of two elite defenses in college football. Do you feel like this is going to be as low scoring as we do, or do you think that maybe Notre Dame's offense will be better than anticipated?
I think it will be very low scoring, or better put, because there's so much speed on defense and big playability that can create short fields into points. If it goes over that 46-point total, the yards won't match the over. Does that make sense? I think it will be a slugfest game. Points sometimes happen if you get three short fields. One team gets an actual defensive touchdown or special teams create something. But I don't think the yards are going to match it if it goes over. And I think we talked about this before we studied it back in April. Carter, I was like, I don't know, 12-6. No, I don't think it's going to be like that, of course, but I really do believe it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think at some point it really settles in, too, where the defensive coordinators, the defenses are going to be ahead of both offenses. So the points that don't happen early, I think the defense settles in after that and slows this game down. As for living next to Coach Elko, I hope I see him on the field because it was only 1 year, insert joke here for Notre Dame fans, but it was only 1 year that he lived there. And the last thing I remember was the first thing I remember, we were at an Easter egg hunt with our kids, and his son was like 11 or 12, and he broke his arm that previous day. So his son now has to be in college. What do you think about that? That's incredible. So I'd like to run into my old neighbor at some point on the field pregame. Probably won't happen postgame.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, he's in maybe high school now, college, potentially. But look, you mentioned that offense, and obviously Mike Denbrock, one of the big additions this offseason on the offense side of the ball. How do you think that changes the offense, and what do you think they'll kind of look like Saturday night under him?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've had some pushback on our message board because Denbrock has mentioned a few times, like, I hope, and this is what any coach would say, I hope we're judged by how much better we get offensively during the season, which is a great thing to say in the NFL or in the NBA or in Major League Baseball, but it's not as necessarily the best thing to say when you have a very big game against the top defense you're going to face all year in week one. Look, I think this is the best defense A&M is going to face unless they play Georgia in the SEC championship game. And I think this is the best defense Notre Dame is going to face easily. So Denbrock has his hands full. He has, of course, a very young offensive line. They have 6 career starts. That doesn't ever happen at Notre Dame. One freshman, true freshman, Anthony Knapp, he beat out – well, actually, they lost their starter, Charles Jagasa, and then a fifth-year guy, Tosh Baker, who I think, Carter, you might have even covered Tosh Baker when he was younger. Anthony Knapp went and beat him out. But the theory here is a lot of people would have beaten out Tosh Baker. The surprise is that Sam Pendleton, who's never really played in a high-leverage situation, he's a redshirt freshman, he went out and beat out a 13-game starter from last year. So they are actually starting redshirt freshman on the left side of the line. And the right side of the line, at right tackle is also making good first start. It's just not something you see at Notre Dame often. So Mike Denbrock is going to have to scheme around a very young offensive line, a quarterback that didn't get to know his wide receivers until he flew them down to his house in the summer, because other than he could sit there and throw with surgically repaired foot twice in the spring. Now they have a much better receiving core than they used to have. Last year was incredibly sparse, but I just don't think they can be quite as in sync in game one as they will be in game 5. Notre Dame fans don't want to hear that, but it is a realistic expectation that he's going to have to scheme around some holes. I think he's a good guy to do it. He can adjust to a lot of things that happen. He has seen almost everything at this level.
Yeah, Tim, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the offensive line, because that's certainly been a big talking point. And, having covered Notre Dame, like, you almost never worry about a Notre Dame offensive line. They're almost always strong. And even in the last couple of years, I mean, I recall when they had some injuries, they bring in Joe Alt. He's a 14 tackle, and all of a sudden he becomes who he becomes. And so we talked to Mike Elko about this Monday, and I think he was, trying not to provide any bulletin board material, just saying, hey, any Notre Dame offensive lineman who's starting as a freshman, that probably means they're going to be a first-round pick one day. Do you think that some of these younger guys who are pushing for time and going to be starting against Texas A&M, do they have that potential, or has this offensive line gone backwards enough to where, man, this kind of is a concern, and these guys aren't quite ready yet to have that sort of potential labeled to them?
I just think they're not quite ready yet for A&M's line. I think this will be a very good offensive line by season's end. In the middle, Ashton Craig at center and Billy Strouth at right guard. Craig is probably their best lineman, although Billy Strouth is the fan favorite and was the highest rated recruit. He's actually from Wisconsin. They stole him from Wisconsin. If that's still a thing. Do you steal people? You just decommit nowadays. But Billy Strouth came to Notre Dame from Wisconsin, and Emil Wagner's a top 100 guy. And Sam Pendleton's highly rated. It's really only Knapp who wasn't highly rated by 24/7. He was from a couple other services. I think the offensive line will be the team's strength when A&M comes next year, which is interesting enough to South Bend. Yeah. It's just hard when that's zero communication. I mean, even if it wasn't going to be loud, you're going to have false starts and trouble communicating when it's your first time out there together. I think the one thing they did was we saw around August 12th, I think was the last time we were in practice. We saw Pendleton next to Knapp. We had a feeling it was going to be Knapp, even though he's a true freshman. And I was like, are they trying to just make sure they have a backup center because the other guard may have to play center? I think they went with this for the last two weeks, 17 days to try to make sure they could have as much continuity as possible. But there's a reason teams with 130 starts on their offensive line are favored going into seasons as one of the better offensive line. This one has 6. Next year will have a lot more. It'll be a good line by the end of the year to echo Mike Denbrock, but you cannot give them an advantage over Texas A&M's front in this game. You can't scheme into that.
Tim, you mentioned Riley Leonard's injury that he suffered this spring. How has he looked this fall camp? And is he going to probably be 100% himself Saturday night, or how's he look so far?
Yeah, he's not really among the injury concerns. We talked to his quarterback coach, Gino Gaduli, who came over from Cincinnati, and he said, it's interesting. We know why we recruited him, but when you see him throw, it has more on it than I thought. When you see him run, he's faster than I thought, even though we knew he was fast. They say he's running away from defensive backs. So I think Riley Leonard's ready to go. He's going to carry the ball a lot in this game. That's part of the scheming away, or he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot to try to make plays in the read option. I think he's fully healthy. So apparently he was fully healthy. He said he could have played in the blue gold game. I think that was just trying to be, which is April. I think he was probably a little over his skis on that one, but I think Leonard's healthy. Benjamin Morrison, the cornerback, shoulder surgery in April. I assume he's healthy because he requested contact in camp. And the first day in camp, we saw him dive on a special teams drill. I was like, well, you wouldn't really do that on a day one of camp if you're not healthy with a shoulder surgery. So I think he is healthy as well.
Tim, I want to just one last question on the offense. We know what Mitchell Evans can do. Yes. Obviously, one of the better tight ends in the country. But the other skill guys for Notre Dame, I know, having covered Notre Dame, right, that's been sort of like can they have the elite speed? Can they have the playmakers that a Georgia and Clemson might have? Wondering where Notre Dame is. I know it was a weakness last year for them, but it seems like there's a lot more confidence adding Bo Collins from Clemson and Chris Mitchell out of Florida International. But where do you see that group, and how much improved from last year are those position groups?
Yeah, I don't know if they'll be a national level, but they're nationally level improved, because they were not good last year. It was not a good group last year. It was too young. There wasn't enough speed. The best players were battling hamstring injuries. Like, everything just came together for just a confluence of bad events for Notre Dame at wide receiver and for Sam Hartman last year. It's really why Mitchell Evans emerged. We joked Mitchell Evans won't beat Texas A&M because Mike Elko got beat by Mitchell Evans at Duke last year. He put on a showcase at Duke 1 week after doing it to Ohio State too. So as soon as he catches his first down, I think that's like they're gonna have a couple guys over there by Mitchell Evans. But Jaden Greathouse is a sophomore from Westlake, Texas. He's actually Cade Klubnik's best wide receiver when they were there together. Greathouse, I think, is going to be the best player of the receivers. He is not a burner. They actually moved him from the outside to the slot, so he's a bigger slot now. They're going with a bigger slot. Their backup is probably the quickest guy on the offense, Jaden Harrison. They brought him in because he's the nation's leading kick returner from Marshall. I like to joke he's 1-0 at Notre Dame because he came and beat Notre Dame a couple years ago with Marshall. But he looked great in camp. We just think that Greathouse is a better national receiver. But Harrison will be there. They're going to rotate 6 guys. If A&M fans don't know, they were bad enough last year at receiver where this is a compliment for the player, but also it points out how bad the situation was. Lacrosse walk-on freshman Jordan Faison was inserted in the game for the first time week 7 against Louisville, and he scored a touchdown on his first play. And the announcers had no idea who he was because he had never played before and he wasn't on football scholarship. So he actually ended up being the MVP of the Sun Bowl. He's a good player. He's going to start he and Chris Mitchell from Florida International will start on the outside at X. Mitchell had 1,000 yards. It was at Florida International. That's what people like to see. We just need to see him do it from Notre Dame, Texas A&M perspective other than Florida International. He's even mentioned there's better cornerbacks at this level, and that's why he's here testing himself to go to the NFL. And on the other side, you mentioned Bo Collins. He came in from Clemson, and he tested as well as anybody at Notre Dame in the summer. Notre Dame really likes its strength and conditioning program, and the NFL has kind of proven that over the recent years, starting with Kyle Hamilton and Miles Boykin. But the 2 best athletes on the team apparently in the summer were Bo Collins and Riley Leonard. So I guess Duke and Clemson have some pretty good strength and conditioning programs as well, because I guess they tore it up in testing.
No doubt. I had the chance to watch Jaden Greathouse quite a bit and on the high school level, and very, very good player.
Yeah, naturally a really good receiver. He's a pure wide receiver.
Makes a lot of contested catches too, so that's another thing with him. If you listen to us, so we got plenty more to get to with Tim. If you listen to us on the video, stick with us. If you listen to us on the podcast side, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with plenty more from Tim. Here with Tim Evans on Irish Illustrated. Tim, wanted to ask you about Howard Cross, sticking on the injury front. Obviously, he was dealing with a hamstring injury. How's he looked, and how's he health-wise?
It's funny. I have 3 sources I do not trust that tell me he's not healthy. So I'm not reporting anything along those lines. But Cross missed a lot of camp. Then we heard rumors that he would only come out when media was there, but we weren't even there enough for that to work, honestly. Notre Dame put out a picture of obviously a training camp practice where Howard Cross was in full pads playing, and I think that was their point to show the media he's playing. He hurt his hamstring very early. My concern, I know Howard Cross will play in the game. The difference is Howard Cross is probably Notre Dame's 2nd best college football player. He needs to play 55 snaps, not 25 snaps, because you have to worry about his hamstring in 100-degree heat. So that's really where we are with Howard Cross. There's better professional nose tackles and defensive tackles, plenty of them in college right now. He is probably the 2nd best interior college football player right now. He makes plays all over the field. He's 292 pounds. He makes up for it the way he plays football, and this is actually his 6th year. And part of it that really helps him is Riley Mills in his 5th year. Carter, I think you covered Riley Mills early on, perhaps. He has really improved. Riley Mills was like the 150th rated player in the country. He played as a freshman in 2020, which is why he's still here. And you're like, he's all right. 2021 seems fine. 2022, they moved him outside, didn't work. 2023, all of a sudden, you're like, wow, that guy really got good. And so it's those 2 together. They make the defense work because you have 24 and 23-year-old grown men who have played 50 games apiece in the middle of that defensive line.
Tim, I want to ask you about the vaunted secondary the Irish have. First, I gotta say,
That's
Xavier
weird,
Watts.
isn't it?
Yeah.
you didn't cover vaunted secondary very often, I don't think.
No, Julian Love was pretty good.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah,
But yeah, there were some tough stretches. I remember the Notre Dame Clemson game very well back in 2018. But Xavier Watts. Got to tell this quick story because I covered him as a recruit, and I do this Q&A with each player that signed with Notre Dame. And this year I just decided, I'm going to ask them what their hottest take is and just see what they say. And Xavier told me he thinks the earth is flat. And I remember the reaction. He's such a great kid.
Yeah, he really is. That's funny.
His dad, Jeff, is awesome. And I felt terrible because, I put it out there. Yeah. And just the criticism he got for that was really funny. I think he has vindicated himself.
Yes, he has.
Great player. 2 All-Americans on the back end for Notre Dame. Just how special is this group? Is this the best secondary in the country? And, we saw them against Ohio State last year really do well. I mean, can they even be better than that this year?
Yeah, the key is Cam Hart, who is the only guy that left last year, the player that left last year that matters. He's not the only one, but he's in the NFL, and he was a fifth-year guy. And we joked that when he stepped on campus for training camp in his 5th year, the only reason he was on campus is he had 3 shoulder surgeries, so he had to come back. He looked like he was on the 49ers when he was on Notre Dame's practice field, and they've replaced him with a guy, Christian Gray, as a sophomore, who won the job over Jaden Mickey. That we joked when we saw Christian Gray as a freshman, who's the transfer from LSU, because they are recruiting a different type of corner than they ever used to. Like Julian Love is a phenomenal player and an NFL captain, but he didn't look like these guys. This is the NFL look of Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray. So I am really interested to see Gray play because you don't avoid Morrison, it's college football, but the other side has a really good corner in Christian Gray. So they have 2 All-Americans with Xavier Watts as the returning Nagurski Award winner. Morrison, I think Morrison was probably even a little better as a freshman than he was last year. Now he was tremendous against Marvin Harrison Jr. So, I mean, that pretty much that says a lot right there, 2 years in a row. But he had 6 picks as a freshman, including a pick 6 to help beat Clemson when they were undefeated. So they played a lot of football in the back end between Watts and Morrison. They did get a bit of a surprise starter, redshirt freshman Adon Schuler, beat out grad transfer Rod Hurd, who has 2,300 snaps at nickel, safety, and corner under his belt at Northwestern. So they like Schuler. I think he's physical and faster. I thought Rod Hurd would win because the defense, Al Golden's defense in his 3rd year, all they talk about is how NFL style, NFL complicated, all these NFL machinations. I thought you would need a guy like Rod Hurd back there to kind of complete the secondary, but it's a good group. The weakness there would be, I shouldn't say weakness. They've had a really good nickel the last 2 years, and they're going to play nickel. Arizona State grad transfer Jordan Clark. They love Jordan Clark. He looked good in camp. I never thought he was a great nickel for Arizona State, but he's also in a much better defense right now, and he's healthy. That's Ryan Clark's son for those watching at home. So Jordan Clark's going to start at nickel. They are going to be more nickel than they will be 4-3. They have been the last 3 years, and Al Golden just goes. We even asked the linebackers coach, Max Bola, who's a old school Michigan State linebacker. He's like, nah, we play nickel. So he kind of gave in.
So I'm got to ask you just a 2-part question for you. If A&M wins this game, what do you think the reason is? And if Notre Dame wins this game, what do you think the reason is?
I think if A&M wins, it's a simpler answer. It's that defensive line just makes life so difficult for Notre Dame, makes them one-dimensional, and Leonard can't pass them out of it. I love Riley Leonard, the person, the athlete, the competitor, the runner, and I like him as the passer. And if he was the passer we all loved, he'd be in the NFL right now because the injury probably stopped him from having the year that would have allowed him to go to the NFL. That's certainly fair. But I never saw Riley Leonard like other people did where they said, well, he could be a day 1 pick. I just thought he was a great college quarterback that was going to give Notre Dame and Clemson and everybody else trouble. But if you can't dictate to A&M at all, in other words, if Mike Denbrock can't come up with 1st and 10s and 2nd and 3s where he can throw, and they're always playing behind the chains, I mean, I think A&M controls the game that way. And if that happens, I think you go super conservative if you're Notre Dame and you try to make A&M's offense beat you with 75-yard drives because Notre Dame doesn't give up a lot of 75-yard drives. If Notre Dame wins, the offensive line plays better than we thought they could, and they can just stay ahead of the chains. I'm confident that if Notre Dame's offense and special teams don't turn it over, Notre Dame's defense will hold A&M to that 21-point area. I think both teams are in that area. They just don't give up. They just don't give up a lot of long drives. I mean, they are loaded defensively. It's the most experienced defense they will have in years. Even their middle linebacker, Jack Kaiser, I think Karels covered him in high school. He's still there. He's in his 6th year. He's finally gets a chance to be the guy. Pro Football Focus rankings are, of course, you never know. It's who's doing the rankings. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're off. But he's got to be doing something right, because 4 years in a row, Jack Kaiser is 1, 3, 2, and 3 as a backup or as a part-time player. And now he's their starting weak side linebacker. So I think the defense for Notre Dame will be great. I have no idea what the offense will look like if they can't get things going against that defensive front from A&M. Yeah,
quick aside, I'm trying to get Jack's dad to go to the Midnight Yell with me. So we'll see if that happens.
Jack was it was fun. Remember, Notre Dame fans really didn't want him because he went to ended up being a 4-star, but he went to a school where his single A football in Indiana is not high. It's not high on the priority list of most recruiting coaches. So Elko recruited him though too a little bit. So that's an interesting. He became a very good player, and he'll be an NFL linebacker. He's the guy that doesn't look fast, quote unquote, but he actually is. So he's a pretty good player for the Irish.
So Tim, I look at this Notre Dame schedule, and you kind of look at it as a 3-game schedule.
That's changed since you were there too.
And Florida State now, with all of a sudden, are they going to be as good as we thought? I mean, my goodness. And so maybe Georgia Tech's better than we thought, though, too. So if you look at that schedule, I'm just wondering, Notre Dame wins this game, just the ceiling of this team, right? What do you think the ceiling of this team can be? And if they win this game, what kind of season could they have?
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to win this game. Most of the summer, I've kind of leaned towards A&M in one of those rock fights. But I did say on our podcast last week, if they win this game, they're going 12-0, because it shows how good they are if they win this game in these circumstances with an offensive line playing for the first time. They won't be they should not be tested again until Louisville comes to town. If you can't get up for a Louisville team that bundled you last year when you were still in the top 10, that's your own fault. They're coming to South Bend. Florida State was always coming to South Bend in November. That's not ideal for Florida State's situation. Sometimes you get decent weather, sometimes you don't. And then USC is always a tough game for Notre Dame to go out there in a rivalry situation. But, I mean, it's not the same as going and facing Caleb Williams 2 years ago at USC. And I really think the Trojans, I know a lot of SEC people don't look at Big Ten schedules, but you should now, because USC and UCLA play the craziest schedules you have ever seen. I mean, USC has to play LSU, Michigan, and Notre Dame, along with their own rivals and Oregon and everybody else. It's just a ridiculous situation for those old Pac-12 teams. So I think Notre Dame, there's usually college football like Georgia Tech and at Purdue, because it's a one-way rivalry nowadays. Those type of teams can challenge Notre Dame, but they shouldn't if Notre Dame can beat Texas A&M. On paper, I think it's like 2018, Carter, where Michigan came to Notre Dame, was a 2-point favorite. Notre Dame kind of beat them from beginning to end, and then Michigan went on their quote-unquote revenge tour before Ohio State murdered them. I think it's like that. I think Notre Dame will – I like to throw that in for Michigan fans, but I really think it's that type of situation that they really won't be challenged. Remember, Stanford was supposed to be good, but that was the beginning of the end for Stanford. They were preseason top 7 and then kind of stunk. Virginia Tech was down. I think this is just a down schedule. Like last year they had the last 2 years they had Ohio State, Clemson, and USC. 2 years ago that was at Ohio State, undefeated 10-0 Clemson, Caleb Williams, USC. They have nothing like that this year because it's A&M's defense and a future pro and Connor Wegman, but you don't think of A&M's offense and Connor Wegman like USC and Caleb Williams or even Ohio State and C.J. Stroud. This is the best quarterback Notre Dame will face this season. 2 years ago it was C.J. Stroud and Caleb Williams. That's a huge difference when you're going into a season on paper.
Tim, just following up on that, obviously I think it's safe to say the goal for Notre Dame, right, is to reach the playoffs and be able to get in there and win games. What do you think they need to do, and how important is this game to Notre Dame's hopes of getting to the college football playoffs?
I think because of what we talked about, they have to run the table if they lose this game. If in previous years, if they were to go 11-1, they're guaranteed to get in because they would have beaten a really good team. It's possible they get in at 10-12, but then they're the 11 seed traveling somewhere. That's a tough situation too, although you'll take it if you're a Notre Dame fan and just get in the playoffs and try it. I think the goal really should be to make the playoffs and win a playoff game, and then you're in the top 8. And I mean, you might draw Georgia, and you can't say the goal is you have to beat Georgia, but the
Right.
reasonable goal is to win a playoff game. And of course, once you win that playoff game, you can have higher aspirations. I don't know if Notre Dame will make it at 10-2. I know Brad Crawford had a show where he mentioned that they will almost never be left out at 10-2. Would you put Notre Dame in if they lose to A&M and then say 8-4 Florida State in November? I don't know. I think that could really hurt. Or what if they lose at USC to end the year, and that's the last thing you see of Notre Dame? It's a tough situation. If they beat A&M, then they're going to make the playoff because they're not going to go 10. I promise you, if they beat A&M under these conditions, they will not go 10-2 unless the injuries just go crazy.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, whoever, no matter the result, the opposing team's going to root for the other team the rest of the season.
Yeah, I know that is.
That's
Strange. That was Notre Dame fans in Michigan back in the day. Like, oh, this is kind of fun that Michigan keeps winning. It is strange. And obviously A&M has hurdles after that, but they miss Alabama this year, right?
They do. Yep, they do.
And Georgia. Yep.
Got Texas back.
Georgia.
But you can't avoid Georgia if ultimately to go to the playoffs because most likely at least you can't avoid Georgia.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it until Wegman's easily the best quarterback on the unless Haynes King catches up the way he's playing for Georgia Tech, but that would be they just don't have it. There's really not DJ Uigalele. I don't think it's going to be USC either.
Yeah,
going to revive an age-old debate on our board about Haynes King and kind of where that's going to be.
Oh, really? Good. Could A&M have had Haynes King? Is that what it was?
No, A&M. I think A&M fans are kind of looking back at Haynes King and how he's playing at Georgia Tech now, and thinking about his time at A&M and.
Oh, that's right. I totally forgot.
Looking back on that, so
wouldn't hurt to have both. You're always supposed to have both.
Yeah, Tim. One more, man. This is such a unique year with the 12-team playoff coming back, and I know that former AD Jack Swarbrick was involved with kind of the new model and very unique with Notre Dame to where they can't get the bye, but they don't have to play a conference championship game, right. And they can host if they, are a 5 seed, 6 seed, that kind of thing. Wondering how you feel about it, because I think the common college football fan looks at that, they're just like, oh, they got screwed. They don't have a bye. But everyone in the Notre Dame community is like, you guys are idiots. This is actually great for Notre Dame. So could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, if they end up hosting a playoff game December 21st in South Bend, Indiana, it's going to go well for Notre Dame, I think, because first of all, you're a good team, and you're not getting one of the top 4 teams. Yeah, if Notre Dame goes 12-0, they cannot be ranked in the top 4 of the college football playoff. But that is because they don't have that conference championship game. There is a much greater chance of losing the conference championship game and getting pushed out of the playoffs or getting pushed to a road game than not playing it. And then either playing a road game or playing a home game. You are just better off not playing that game. Maybe as time goes on, if Notre Dame wins a couple playoff games, you think, well, now they're dead going into because they have played 15 games and they're at that point 14 games. I just don't think so. I think it's huge that Notre Dame got that. I think it's also realistically is the best deal you can get. They're independent. They had to give something up. Jack Swarbrick has always known he has to give a little something up to remain independent and have all the power that comes with independence. And they gave up being a top 4 seed. If you're not 12-0, you're not a top 4 seed if you're Notre Dame anyway. If you're 11-1, you're not a top 4 seed if you're Notre Dame because you're not playing the conference championship game where someone jumps right over you. That's the thing. If you're number 3 or 4, especially number 4, and you don't play that conference championship weekend and someone wins, you're popping down to number 5 anyway. It really was a smart move by him. I know we talked to him before he left, and he mentioned that when he believes it'll expand to 14 teams, which is incredible. We haven't even done the 12 yet. He believes it's going to expand to 14 teams, and he said that helps them even more. It adds it. You're adding another at-large spot as well. So Notre Dame fans are happy with it, and at least they gave something up. That way, other fans of not Notre Dame, people that don't like Notre Dame, can say, well, they can't be in the top 4. But I'm telling you, if you're not undefeated, you're not in the top 4 anyway.
Yep. Tim, tremendous insight. Thanks so much for joining us, and enjoy your time down in College Station this weekend. Should be a really good one. I know you'll get to see Carter. Keep him in line a little bit if you would.
Yes, it's not an easy place to get to. I found out. I have connecting in Dallas, flying in Houston, driving to A&M. So. But
it should be a great night there. College game day coming to town, and should be a great way to kick off the season. Thanks again, and enjoy the weekend down in College Station, and we'll get you on again soon.
All right. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tim.